Hey everyone, Patrick CK here. There's a whole layer of information all around you right now that your eyes just can't see. The heat leaking around your windows, that one resistor cooking itself on a circuit board, the spot in your ceiling where the insulation just isn't there. We spend a lot of time guessing at that stuff. What if you could just look at it instead? That's where the InfiRay P2 Pro comes in. A 256 by 192 pixel thermal camera that plugs straight into your phone and is small enough to carry in your pocket. Nobody sent me this. I bought it myself for an ongoing project. After about a month of using it, I wanted to share my thoughts on it, the good and the bad, and talk about why I think this is a great device for anyone from DIY tinkerers to home inspectors and more. Let's unbox it, cut through the spec sheet, and talk about the software issue that almost ruined it for me. First thing, right on top, the instructions and a cleaning cloth. Then the accessories box with a 20-inch or 50-centimeter extension cable. I really like that they include this, not just because my phone has a large protective case, but also it lets you plug this into a laptop or PC and run the camera remotely. That is much appreciated. Then the camera itself. It's small, but it feels solid with a nicely finished aluminum body. And being this small, it's very light, coming in at just 9 grams. The thing to understand is that this is just a camera. All the computation happens on whatever you plug it into. That's why it can stay this small. Lastly, the macro lens with its own little cover. The listing says the package includes a protective case. There is no case. The macro lens does come with a little cover, but that's all. If you want something to actually carry this in, you'll have to find one yourself. I picked up a generic small hard case for 14 bucks. It does the job, link below. It's not a big expense, but it's contrary to what they say you get for $240. One more tip. If you don't want to run the full extension cable, a plain USB-C extender does the same job to get past a phone's thicker case. I got a 2-pack for 7 bucks, link to that one below. The real selling point is that macro lens. It attaches magnetically and lets the camera focus down on tiny components. InfiRay claims it resolves resistors down into the millimeter range. So instead of a warm blob, you can actually pick out the single component that's cooking. No fragile threads to strip. It just snaps right on. This was one of the reasons I chose the InfiRay over other thermal cameras. Almost no one else includes a macro lens with their thermal camera. It's usually an add-on with a hefty price. And for what I'm using it for, I really needed that macro lens. I do wish the magnetic attachment was keyed a little better. I have to wiggle it around a little before I feel it's properly seated. Once it's in place though, it does feel quite secure. So it's not a deal breaker, but it's not the confident snap you want immediately. One thing to remember while using this camera, every few minutes it makes a little click. It sounds exactly like a camera's shutter. At that same moment, the live view stutters, like it's dropping a couple frames, then picks right back up. That is a shutter. There's actually a tiny mechanical blade inside, and it swings across the sensor to keep it calibrated. It does that because the sensor in a camera like this drifts while in use. As the camera's body warms up, each pixel wanders off by a slightly different amount. And if nothing corrects that, your image would slowly go blotchy and your temperatures would creep away from the truth. So every few minutes the camera closes that blade, looks at a surface it knows is perfectly uniform, calculates how far each pixel has drifted, resets itself, and opens back up. That whole process happens in milliseconds. The industry calls it flat field correction. It's the reason the number on the screen still means something 20 minutes into a session. Every uncooled thermal camera does this. There is a setting to turn it off for videos, but my advice is to leave it on. If you're measuring anything, that shutter is what keeps you honest, and a clean video of slowly drifting numbers isn't worth much. Let's look at some specs. InfiRay lists the sensor at 256 by 192. That's 49,152 pixels. The stills I pull off this thing are 1080 by 1440, about 1.6 megapixels, roughly 31 times more pixels than the sensor can physically see. All that extra resolution comes from upscaling 5.625 times. They size the picture to your display, not the sensor. Video does the same at half the scale. Now, to be fair, they're not lying about the resolution the way a lot of dashcam manufacturers do. They tell you upfront that it's 256 by 192. You just have to remember that a bigger file does not mean more thermal detail. Every piece of real information in that image came from the 49,000 pixel sensor readings. Everything else is smoothing. In their marketing, they have an image of a cat through the thermal camera that looks crystal clear. Unfortunately, that's not really the case. Here's a video of some of the stray cats that visit me, mostly for the food. It's still absolutely fascinating how you can make them out. It's just not as clear as their marketing might suggest. But just look at these guys. It's so cool. It refreshes at 25 Hertz. The temperature range, 1022 Fahrenheit or 550 C. Now, thermal sensitivity uses a metric called NETD, or Noise Equivalent Temperature Difference. It's the smallest temperature difference the sensor can detect above its own electrical noise. The Amazon listing doesn't mention it at all. InfiRay's own user manual does, and it's 50 millikelvin, 5/100ths of a degree Celsius. And a few rows below on that same spec sheet is the accuracy figure, plus or minus 2 Celsius or 3.6 Fahrenheit. Look at those two together. This camera can see 5/100th of a degree difference between 2 points, while at the same time also being 2 full degrees off about what either of them actually is. That's a 40-to-1 gap. But those two specs measure different things. Sensitivity is telling two things apart. Accuracy is being right in absolute terms. It's the difference between a bathroom scale that reads in tenths of a pound, but might be 5 pounds off. And that's the whole story with this camera. It's superb at telling you this spot is hotter than this one, less precise about the exact number. But 2 degrees high on one thing is 2 degrees high on the next. So the difference is still true. It only matters if you're checking against a hard limit. All of that sits on top of what really governs these cameras, emissivity, which is how a given surface actually radiates heat. Shiny bare metal and matte paint at the exact same real temperature will read differently. That's not a knock on this camera, that's just physics. All of this runs through an app called easily enough P2 Pro, and the camera does nothing until you install it, which brings us to a big problem. As of making this video, the official app does not work on Android 16, and that is extremely annoying. Android 16 came out in 2025, and the app itself hasn't been updated since 2024. So, if you're on even a slightly modern phone, this app won't even show up in the Play Store. Apparently, you're dead in the water. There are APKs floating around that do work. I found one that I could sideload, and luckily it runs fine. But sideloading an APK to get a product you paid for to function feels sketchy, and I don't love recommending it. I'll leave a link to the one I use below with the warning that they can change that link at any time. If you're not comfortable installing an APK, that's a completely reasonable place to stop. If you're brave or lucky enough to actually get into the app, it's quite nice. Color gradients, a professional mode where you can drop pointers and areas to focus the reading on live, photos, videos, and a suite of settings. And then there's one feature that won me back a little. When you take a picture, it stamps the temperature readings onto it. But it also lets you go back into that saved photo afterwards and completely rework the measurements. Strip off every reading and drop in your own. Place a point exactly where you want it. Draw a rectangle and have it pull the hottest, coldest, and average inside that box. Or wipe all of it and just have a clean thermal image. You can also rotate images. So if you shot it vertically, but you want the numbers reading straight across, you can spin it so they line up. And you're doing all of this on a saved image you might have taken a month ago. This is what the listing buries under the phrase secondary analysis. And honestly, they really undersell it, which is exactly what makes the next part so baffling. Because for some reason, at least on my phone, the text of the readings is red. Always red. No matter what temperature it's showing. Against a warm image, you can sometimes barely read what it says. Oddly, I tried the same camera on a different phone running Android 15, and the text came up white and was perfectly legible. So I don't know if it's an OS thing or a device thing. What I do know is that there's no setting anywhere to change the text color. They'll let me redraw every measurement on the image, move points around, rotate old images, but this one thing they won't let me touch. All that customization and not the one setting I actually need. And one more thing, which took me embarrassingly long to find. One of the most important settings on this camera is emissivity, because that's the one that describes whether your temperature is right at all. It is not in the settings menu. It's behind an unlabeled white circle floating on the live screen, which opens a little radio menu, and it's in there under correction. Presets exist for water, glass, brick, skin, wood, and a custom value if you want it. So it's all there, and it's good. It's just hidden behind the least obvious control in the app. Another feature I thought was pretty cool is picture-in-picture mode, where you can see the thermal image and a real-life feed through your phone's camera at the same time, which is great if you can't tell what you're looking at. It doesn't work so well up close because the thermal camera hangs off the bottom of your phone and your phone's cameras are on the other end. They don't quite line up when you need to get close to something, but from a distance, it works pretty well. There is a desktop app too, and unfortunately, that one let me down quite a bit. The version you download from InfiRay's own website is old, and it loads the default language as Chinese. And then you can download the updated version, which has quite a few more features. The problem I had is that the images it produces are nowhere near as clean as the ones that come off the phone. That's what I was hoping it could do, but alas, I've ended up using the phone for all of my testing. Here's a test I haven't seen anyone else do on one of these. Everything it does runs off your phone's battery, but how much battery does the camera actually use? So I ran some tests. 10 minutes of just live view, panning around and looking at things, then 10 minutes of actually recording. I ran each test a few times to confirm the results. Live view cost me around 3 to 4% of my battery over 10 minutes on my Samsung S26 Ultra. Recording came out about the same, maybe a percent more. Scale that up and you're looking at roughly 18 to 24% an hour. At the end of the day though, no one uses a thermal camera for 4 straight hours. Most people pull it out, check something, put it away. The battery cost is basically noise. Now, I'm not a professional thermographer, so I'm not going to pretend I'm doing building envelope audits here. What I care about is the practical stuff, and there's one job I've already been hammering this thing on. This is the whole reason I bought the P2 Pro. If you've seen my CKBench card check segments in my dashcam reviews, you know I run a custom benchmarking tool on memory cards and flash drives to find out how they actually perform compared to their own marketing. And there's a piece of that story a speed number alone can't tell you, and that's heat. A card quietly cooking itself under sustained load is a problem. Up until now, the best I could do was feel how hot a card got. Now I can watch and record every degree these cards produce through a run. And this is where that little macro lens stops being a novelty. Hold it over a full-size SD card right after a run, and you don't get a warm blob. You get the card's actual guts lit up. You can pick out the memory die and the contact structure glowing right through the shell, almost like an X-ray done in heat. The first time it resolved that, I just stopped and stared at it. It is so freaking cool. And the numbers caught me off guard. These things don't get warm, they get hot. I logged one little flash drive climbing all the way through a write, leveling off around 138 Fahrenheit, and then pushing past 148 Fahrenheit or 63C when I switched to hammering it with reads. Then came a card that blew my mind, a high-speed express card sitting on the bench reading 195 Fahrenheit or 90C. That's not a temperature you want your data living at. Even more surprising, that card was built so well that it didn't even thermal throttle. That's impressive. You can read more about that card and all the cards I've tested so far at the link below. Subscribe for more. That's the work I've actually done with it. Then there's everything you can still turn it loose on around the house. See how well your doors and windows are sealed, where the insulation in the roof is thin or missing, where a water leak might be hiding behind the wall. Honestly, it really is like seeing a whole other world. It's fascinating to me. I hope you think so too. To gauge how accurate this little camera is, I ran some tests. Here's the setup, and it's one anyone can repeat at home. 2 references, one cold and one hot, and a contact thermometer measuring each. That probe is my source of truth. The camera has to match the probe or at least get very close. Using water for this test is crucial for a very important reason. Every thermal camera reads a surface based on its emissivity, how readily that surface gives up its heat as infrared. Water is close to a perfect emitter, which makes it about as forgiving a target as you can point one of these cameras at. That's why it's the reference. Cold side first, an ice bath. And here's the honest part. A properly stirred slush holds at 32 Fahrenheit, and mine drifted warmer than that while I was working, which is fine because the probe is the reference anyway. My probe read 43.3 Fahrenheit, and the camera read 43.8, so only a 0.5 degree difference. Now the hot end, and I have to be upfront about my own testing here because the water cooled off more than I wanted before I could get a clean paired reading for 2 reasons. First, the app kept interrupting me with a burn protection warning. And that's a real feature. Remember that shutter plate from earlier? It physically closes to protect the sensor if you keep it aimed at something too hot for too long. It was doing exactly its job. It just made getting a steady reading a bit of a fight. The second reason is the burner. I had turned it off, but it was still sitting there reading over 300 degrees, which is honestly the best argument for owning one of these that I can give you. That is a surface you would absolutely reach past without thinking twice. So by the time I got my clean frame, the water was well off the boil. But that's fine again, because the question was never what the water was doing, it was whether the camera agrees with the probe. My thermometer read 148.8. The camera read 148.4, 0.4 of a degree apart. InfiRay claims plus or minus 2 degrees Celsius, which is 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit. I got 0.4. That's impressive. Now, one reading under good conditions is not a certification. And I did watch those two numbers drift apart and come back together while I was working. So I'm not going to tell you it's this close every time. But nevertheless, it did a good job. One thing I thought was absolutely fascinating while doing this test was looking down at the hot water and just being mesmerized by all the colors and the movement. It looks like flowing lava. And that's what gets me about this camera. Because when you look at it with your naked eye, it's just a pan of clear water. It's absolutely amazing. Bottom line, the InfiRay P2 Pro is a legitimately useful tool that punches well above its size. And that macro lens is the reason to want it if you tinker with electronics or DIY around your house. I like the hardware for its compact size and solid feel. It can go anywhere, and the included cable shows somebody was actually thinking about the end user, at least on the hardware side of it. The software is where it stumbles, and it's an annoying one. An official app that doesn't run a current version of Android with no updates since 2024? Reading text I can barely see on my own phone, and a Windows download that boots into an older version in the wrong language? And yet, when it runs, that same app has some of the most thoughtful editing tools I've ever seen. That's the frustrating part. The talent is clearly there, but the attention isn't. This is a company coasting on good work it did a couple years ago. At $239, it's still a good deal, especially with the included macro lens. And hopefully, someday the company gets off their lazy butts to update that app, and they'll be on top of the world. As always, I'll leave links to everything in the description. If you enjoyed this content, like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, this has been Patrick CK. Goodbye.